I asked ChatGPT how to buy a house, and this is what it said. Buying a house is a significant financial decision that involves several key steps. Here's a comprehensive guide to help you navigate the home buying process. Then it talks about number one, assess your financial situation. And absolutely, I agree, because if you don't know if you can afford to buy a house, or even if you should, or if you can afford it financially, then maybe you need to figure that part out. So what you would do is then you would want to look at maybe talking with a mortgage broker. There's several different types out there in the world, and in my buyer's briefing I get much more detail than this, but a quick overview: you're going to have your credit unions, your regular banks, and then also some special types of lenders out there called mortgage brokers. The mortgage brokers can pull on information and money from various financial sources, in some cases even the big banks. And they also compete, so maybe in some circumstances a mortgage broker would be more advantageous. But it doesn't hurt to at least get a couple different opinions on what your interest rate's going to be, your affordability, the types of loans that you're being offered, and so on. So it's not a bad idea to get multiple people to look at that situation. But once they run your credit, it becomes a little bit more of an ownership issue. So once you give them all that information so they can run your credit, I would be weary to keep giving that information. Of course, they do say that if you have your credit run multiple times, that it does lower the score. Credit rating, it goes down. However, there is a fix in that called a rapid rescore. In some cases, lenders do these things, but just be prudent with who you give your financial information to. So after that, that particular lender is going to probably, number two is get pre-approved for a mortgage. That's really part of that process. Then, of course, number three, they're going to talk about me. I would put the real estate agent at the beginning. The reason being is the real estate agent has the access to the inventory. So they know exactly what's out there. They know the price ranges. And most agents, if they're worth their salt, they will actually know by what you make and maybe what your debts are, how much home you can afford to finance. Roughly, of course. The best expert in that game is going to be the real estate lender, as we talked about before, mortgage brokers, regular banks, credit unions. In some cases, the mortgage broker, as I stated before, could be more nimble, so they might be able to give you a better deal at the end of the day, but it's definitely worth getting a couple of opinions. Then, of course, after you hire me, what we'll do is we'll discuss your financial situation, what houses are available, and what are the different attractive qualities of various areas here in Santa Clarita or Greater Los Angeles, Simi Valley, Orange County. Depending on where you want to move, I'll be able to help you. We can break down that conversation and discuss what you're looking for and then how that's going to correspond to price range. In addition to that, the fifth thing that ChatGPT mentions is make an offer. So as far as making an offer, when we do find that residence, there's a few steps in that process. Number one, I want to do all my due diligence and get you complete information about the residence itself. If there is a Mello Roos tax or HOA, I want you to have that information. Also, a lot of cases I see folks going in and approaching real estate, and a property has Mello Roos, which would have been easily discovered maybe prior to viewing the house. But now that they've seen it and like it, get right in offers. So they've checked all these boxes. Then they find out it has Mello Roos or special assessments to the tune of almost double tax, twice as property taxes are in Los Angeles County at 1.25%. So imagine double property taxes. The Mello Roos is so high. At that particular situation, if in fact they're exhausted with regard to their ability to finance real estate, let's say they're at their maximum, that Mello Roos is going to create quite an issue. Knowing that going in would be better, so I do educate my clients on all those various grounds. In addition, I also make sure that I reach out and speak with the agent on the other side of the equation, the seller's agent, and find out what information is going to help my buyer make a better decision regarding the offer that we construct. And finally, after we have the offer written with whatever changes to time frames, if that's in fact what we're going to do, if we're having to compete with other offers, if I can get intel on that, find out what we might be able to do to make our offer better. And of course, anybody can throw money at anything, but in some cases, there are more clever ways than just offering money to the seller. getting your offer accepted. And these are tactics and strategies that I've implemented since my early beginnings in the real estate business back in 1998. So after the offer is put together, then the offer has to be submitted, and that's going to be up to me. We send that offer in, and then of course after that, if in fact there is no counter and they do accept the offer as written, or if we're not competing with other people, generally if they do like what we've written, they'll either accept it or they could counter us back. Don't freak out. A lot of times people get countered back in their offers. That's part of the process. It could be that maybe something was left out, or they're assigning a particular company to handle something within the transaction. For example, if somebody's representing a seller, we write the offer as the buyer to the seller's agent, and I don't put in there the escrow company that the agent likes or the seller is choosing, then usually there'll be a counter that might talk about that. So what I'll try to do ahead of time, due diligence wise, because while we're waiting for that response and counter, other offers are coming in. So as a buyer, it might be best if your agent's a little bit more diligent, like I am with my clients, making sure that we get those responses, at least a complete offer. So in my perfect world, writing an offer with your price, your terms, the best things that support your position as a buyer, but then giving you options as far as what the seller would expect. For example, who they want for escrow, who they're choosing for title. If they're going to be paying for a home warranty for you, who is that company and who is that representative? And, are good. If they are a good company and that's somebody that the seller's insisting that we choose as part of their offer, then great, no problem, because that's going to benefit you. But any little thing that we decide to change, anything that isn't as the seller wants, and I'm not saying let's give away the farm and just hand them everything and look the other way. These are very simple things that have to be negotiated anyway. So why not write the offer where all of that's cinched up? And if he comes back or they come back and they say, well, we have more on this property and we want you to send us your highest and best offer, or change this, or this is what needs to be to happen with it to be competitive, whatever it may be, then we can adjust our approach. But at least we know that we went in the best we could at the beginning. And of course, finally through the process, there's going to be home inspections, other different things that we're going to look at with regard to the property, how it's going to impact your living there. One of the things that they don't mention, and besides the hiring a home inspector part, one of the things that's super important is to also go door knock the neighbors' houses. And a lot of people miss this step. I don't know if agents are shy or if they don't want to intrude, but I figure you're spending upwards of $1 million or more, depending, and it's probably a good idea for you to meet the neighbors. And it's probably a good idea for you to meet the neighbors before we get too deep in escrow and before you start spending money, because you're going to be spending money in escrow. You're going to be writing checks or using Zelle or Venmo or one of the online systems to make a payment, even a credit card. What are these things? Well, you're going to be paying for a home inspection. If the property has a pool, maybe a separate pool inspection. If the property has issues with the roof and we can't get adequate information from a home inspector, or if the home finds something further that they can't explain and can't cover with their knowledge and experience, or suggest that they do see a problem, but they want that particular type of inspector to look at it, then we will get that inspector and we will have them go out to the property. That could cost more money. So when I have a buyer, it's really important for me to get those buyers to door knock those neighbors to find out who's living around, just so you can get an idea, especially if there's some kind of an outside property impact on the property we're going to be purchasing. For example, we go in the backyard. I look at the top of the mountain in the backyard far away, but I see a leaning fence. Well, the question is, whose fence is that? Is it this property owner or the property owner behind? it would be nice to go meet them. We're going to work out whose fence that is. We're going to try to make that something that the seller's going to take care of before we finish. But if we're super competitive, that might be something we'll accept when we get through the process. Because if the seller comes back, and again, in real estate, you don't want to take any of this personal. It's all business. But if the seller comes back saying, well, no, I'm not going to fix that fence. You knew it when you bought the property and it wasn't part of your offer. And if we put it in the offer, then it might be something we'll want to deal with later. It's going to depend on our strategy and the way that the competitiveness on the offer was at the beginning. So there's a lot of different variables. But at the end of the day, let's say we go to the seller and they say, well, we're not going to fix it. Then at least we've met that neighbor. So we can make that decision because that'll be part of our conversation. Well, I'm glad with this neighbor, the fence in the back, the thing's leaning. And it looks like it's a shared fence, which we have a lot of here in Santa Clarita. We see that in Simi Valley, different areas in Los Angeles. So because it's a shared fence, that neighbor and you are going to have a discussion. And if the neighbor is a jerk right at the beginning, they might be playing jerk all the way through. And it might not be a bad thing to say, we were thinking about maybe house on the other side or behind you, and we noticed the fence in the back. And they might say, well, oh my God, we've been wanting to fix that. Talking to that particular guy, didn't realize he was selling. That's what they'll say. And then they'll say, well, we've been wanting him to, but he's been the one holding out. So then we're all wrong, right? Then it's seller that's the one that maybe not the nicest person in the equation, or doesn't want to spend the money, or for whatever reason, maybe they believe it's the neighbor's fault, the fence fell, 1,000 things. But that's part of that negotiation. So once we get that done, you get the home inspection, do the other investigations on the property, and then finally, we have the other parts where it's going to be funded, and there's going to be a time for maybe them to come back prior to funding and say, we need this document from a particular person on your side, Mr. Buyer, Mrs. Buyer, they buyer, them, then have that information given him. And all this takes time to get worked out, because it's not just that lender that we've hired to help you finance, the one that you're talking to, but they have people that work for them. And then the lender has other people working in their offices as well. So you have underwriters, different part of it. So if they're asking you to send in a document, and you get that document super quick and you get it sent in, a lot of times I always say, please CC me on all correspondence to the lender, even if it's not a lender I refer, because I need to keep my eyeball on it as well. If somebody's delaying that process on the other side, I choose it to be up to me to make sure they get their job done quickly, so my buyer doesn't suffer or the seller doesn't suffer. And because there's so many people involved in each and every real estate transaction, you got to stay on top. I appreciate these mega teams out there, these people that have all these other people working for them, and that's great. But who are you hiring? Word of caution. That GPT chews on that question. It gives us 8, and then it has some additional tips: homeowners insurance, property tax, HOA. These are good things, because the other thing we talked a little bit about Mello Roos, when you're going into a property and you see it for the first time, and you're wondering if you can get insurance on it. Well, of course, that's a weird question. If it's in a tract and there's a lot of houses around it, you would think insurance is assumed. It shouldn't be hard to get. Well, it's just California, folks, and things change a lot very quickly. So one of the things I always suggest for my clients is, as we're going out, if it's an area that maybe not established, or I've had experience with there being issues, or maybe it's still worth a phone call anyway, let's find out what the insurance costs on the house. And sometimes you'll call and they'll say, well, we can't insure that house going through your own provider. So now you go to an insurance broker. And believe it or not, there's only a couple that really seem to be able to get properties approved for home insurance pretty much lickety-split all across the board without having to wait these extra time frames. How they do it, it's magic, but it's wonderful. I'll throw out an accolade for Scott Wilk. He's just fantastic, and he is one of those miracle workers in the insurance game. I'm Connor McIver. This has just been a little bit about how to buy a home on ChatGPT, with me, of course, explaining extra. We'll talk to you soon. Check us out, SantaClaritaOpenHouses.com. I'm Connor with Honor. Over and out.